Hey, what's up? John Sonmez here. So I got a question today about overworking leading to burnout. This is something interesting that I've talked about a few times. I think I've done some videos on burnout a while back, but there's always a different perspective on this. And I think that, I think in the past I've talked about how burnout, I don't really believe in burnout, but at least for most people. But it is possible to let's not say burnout, but to get to the point where you have diminishing returns on your work, or you have a serious drop in motivation, right? I think if you're making progress and you're constantly advancing, you're going to have more motivation. But here's the thing, is like in life, you're not always going to do that, right? There's a lot of things you're going to do in life where it's going to feel like you're making backwards progress. In fact, that whole take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that's a reality of life and progressing. And so what I'm saying here is that basically, like, if you get into the state where you're lacking the motivation and even though you're progressing through something that you're doing, what's going to happen is when you take that backward step, depending on what state you're at will determine whether or not you continue and push forward or not. So, and that could feel a lot like something we would call burnout, right? But I don't like to just classify something as burnout, because a lot of times the answer is you need to push through. Now, that's not always the case. There are certain cases where you know that you don't need to push through. And, for example, with me with Simple Programmer, and me coming off Simple Programmer, moving this YouTube channel to my brand and getting out the day-to-day operation of Simple Programmer, that was something I needed to do, right? It was something that, it wasn't just a burnout and pushing through. I had already pushed through, but I needed to change my pace, change my life a little bit, and change direction so that I could get excited about something new and take a break from something that was no longer really inspiring me that much anymore, right? As much as I love you guys, you programmers that are still on my channel here and whatnot, but the stuff I've been talking about on YouTube is much more something that motivates me in the direction I want to go in life, right? And I'm still figuring this shit out. But so here's the question I got here. I do 8 Pomodoros every day, but sometimes time ends before I can finish some part of code or some theme, and I have a strong desire to continue doing this day, and it takes me more time than I have planned. Is it right to do something over my plan, or must I follow my plan and do not practice over it? Can overworking lead to burning out even if I want to work more? So I'm going to put you to a video, guys, real quick, on how I plan my week. This is kind of an older video. I'm not actually doing this anymore, at least right now, because I'm freeing things up. I'm going through a period of a lot more freedom and less constraint, because I'm not trying to hunker down and be super productive at this point, right? I'm going through an inspiration period. I'm looking for that more. But, you guys got to pay your dues. You got to hustle. You got to put in the work. Believe me, I was in hustle mode for a very fucking long time in order to get to where I am now, where I could be in leisure mode, although I'm working out like a like a dog pretty much every day. But that's because I've got some goals I want to reach. So, that will also explain to you the Pomodoro technique. Real quick, what it is it's basically, you set a 25-minute timer, you work for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, and I would break up my schedule, my days into that, and I'd plan so many Pomodoro in a day. So what this person is asking with this question is he's asking, with the Pomodoro, right, I've allocated 8 Pomodoros, right, 8 25-minute blocks of work, right, and I want to do more. Should I do more than that because I feel motivated to do it, or should I stop when I hit the work that I planned, right? So this doesn't have to be with Pomodoros or Pomodori, right? The plural in Italian of tomato, but which it comes from tomato timer. But what it means is this: so essentially, if you plan to do something and you're feeling more motivated, should you go ahead and write that extra page for the book when you plan on writing 5 pages today, right? Should you go ahead and record those extra 2 YouTube videos? Should you go ahead and run that extra 5 miles today or something? What am I saying is basically, should you go beyond when you feel motivation, or will that be a problem? And so my general rule for this is that you want to leave on a high note. You want to stop on a high note, right? But there's definitely some arguments to when things are clicking to keep them clicking along. long. But what I have found in general, and I've tried it both ways, is that when I violate that, when I do more than I planned for the day, or a lot more, if I plan on working for 5 hours, or writing 2 chapters in a book, and I keep on going past that, it feels good and I get it done, but it seems to catch up to me really quickly, and within a couple of days of doing that, even though I'm really motivated at that time, I hit a very big lull in motivation. When I was tracking my Pomodori, right? When I was doing that, like that video, check out that video on how I plan my week. But when I was doing that, I would find that the maximum amount of Pomodori that I could do in a day was somewhere between 10 and 12. And when I went over that to like 14, 16, 18, what ended up happening was that, I was tracking how many was I getting done sort of on a daily average and a weekly basis, is that it would dip the next week. So maybe, one week I'm getting 60 Pomodori done, but then the next week it would drop down to like 40 or 32. And if I stayed consistently at what I could do, which was maybe like 50 per week or something like that, then I would stay consistent and be able to keep that pace, right? So think of it as like running a race, right? I do a lot of medium to long distance running now, right? Last year was the first year I ran a full marathon, I ran a whole bunch of half marathons, and one of the things that I didn't realize about racing at that level, right, when you're at that distance, is that there's a lot of strategy, right? A lot of it is a mental game, and if you're going to run 13 miles, right, 13.1 miles, a half marathon, you can go really fast, right? There were some of them, I've done some videos on this, where I moved my pace up to like 7.5 minute miles, right? But I burned out real damn quick, okay? Even though it felt great, I felt good at that. I sort of, when you're going 13.1 and you know what your average pace is, you sort of have to say, even though I feel good right now, I need to hold back a little bit, right, on this mile. This mile needs to be like an 8.5 minute mile, not a 7.5 minute mile, because I need to sustain for the rest of the way. Because making that, because what ends up happening is like, and this is the same principle, right? And in that race, there were a couple races where I did run, like a 7.5 minute mile, and that's not my pace. That's too fast. What ended up happening was I did that for like 3 or 4 miles, and then the final miles started being like 9.5 minute mile pace. Whereas if I would have just held like an 8:45 or something like that throughout, I could do that the whole way pretty much, or maybe even speed up at the end. So it's the same thing here, right? In general, I would say that you want to hold yourself back a little bit. So you've got a little bit, a lot of famous writers, I've heard more than one writer say that they leave on a high note. They stop when they don't stop when they have writer's block. They stop when they're in the middle of something so that they can pick up the next day and keep going and have that momentum going for them. So that's the thing, just think about that. I know it can be tempting, and there's probably some instances where it does make sense to go forward when you're really on a good note, a high streak, but you can't just keep on doing that. If you keep on doing that, it will catch up to you, and then you'll get to that point where you will feel burned out or overworked, and it will hit you harder. So I'd rather have a more sustained pace and do what you planned, right? And the thing is, like, it's important to just do what you planned in general, because it's important to stick to the plan, because sticking to the plan is what gets you the ultimate end result. Because see, when you stick to the plan, when you don't stick to the plan and you do too much, you also don't stick to the plan and you do too little, right? Because you've got that wiggle room in there, so you want to get rid of as much of that wiggle room as possible. Again, it doesn't mean that there's never any exceptions to this, that you never violate this rule, but in general, this is what I found. So good question, and I hope that helps you. All right, if you haven't subscribed already to this channel, make sure you click that subscribe button below and click the bell so you don't miss any videos. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.